Hello and welcome to December 20th. We are down to our final 5 days, including this one. I have 4 unopened teas left to figure out, so let's get right back at it. Today we have Winter Earl Grey, and I would probably actually have been able to guess that this might have been an Earl Grey by the look of this tea. I think I may have mentioned that I really like Earl Grey. When I was testing out my muslin bags, I tested them on an Earl Grey. I'm really excited because it is absolutely one of my favorite teas just of all time. I've liked it since I was a kid, watching Star Trek TNG and Jean-Luc Picard going to the replicator and ordering his tea Earl Grey hot. I will drink Earl Grey plain. I will drink it with cream. I'll drink it with sugar. Obviously, again, I don't add anything to these teas because I am trying to get the full experience of what this tea has to offer. I even actually like Lady Grey, which is basically Earl Grey but plus lavender. But this is just another Earl Grey. They say it's winter. Now I'm curious as to what they think is going to make it winter versus a more traditional Earl Grey. But this will steep at 95 degrees Celsius for 3 to 5 minutes, and you can basically expect this to give you a medium caffeine boost because it is 2 out of 3 pips. Now, generally, Earl Grey has to have black tea and bergamot oil. This Earl Grey has black tea, pink pepper, which remember is going to be the same as red pepper. I see you over there, David's Tea. I see you. But they're the exact same thing. You can't fool us on that anymore. So pink pepper on here, white tea, which is interesting, natural cream and vanilla flavoring, cornflower petals, bergamot oil, there it is, and natural orange flavoring. So again, the bergamot oil is the one thing that Earl Grey tea really just has to have. So let's go ahead and give this a smell. By smell, I don't actually know that I would know it was Earl Grey. The bergamot is not super prominent. I actually think the orange flavoring that they have in here might actually overpower the bergamot, and so I'm maybe a little less excited. It looks like I would expect a nice winter tea to look, though. It's got, it's black tea, and it's got these wonderful little white leaves in here. And I've got some peppercorns, which I'll pop over here so we can see. It's calling it pink peppercorn, but it's redder than some of the ones that I was pulling in the other tea. I'm guessing these are going to be petals, these big, huge things here. Ooh, that broke like a stem. That's weird. That is very weird. Yeah, I think these are probably cornflower petals, which is going to be a little weird, especially if you're thinking to yourself that you know what cornflower looks like. You're probably right. I suppose it could be the white tea, but then I'm not seeing any cornflower petals, so not sure what's exactly going on there. But, it still smells nice. It's just not smelling like a traditional Earl Grey to me. So I'm going to go ahead and at least transfer this and get ready for that steep, but obviously I will not do so until a little bit through the video. Ooh. Now, when I'm talking about that bergamot, you might be thinking to yourself, what exactly is bergamot? And if you are, then you definitely popped into the right video because whoa, that was a big chunk. Let me pull that back out. Okay, so yeah, this is definitely cornflower on here, but it is a massive chunk here. Anyway, so yes, bergamot is absolutely one of the ingredients that I will be talking about in today's video, along with cornflower petals. So we're going to start with cornflower petals because, partly because I just found that giant one, and partly because since bergamot is that iconic bit of the Earl Grey, I figured I would save the best of it for last. All right, now, if you are thinking back to something you may have seen on these videos, you might be thinking, I already talked about cornflower. I didn't. I talked about chicory, and chicory is sometimes called cornflower but it's actually not a true cornflower. So the true cornflower, also called bachelor's button, is an annual flowering plant of the Asteraceae family. So that goes along with, remember, chamomiles, because they're like daisies. And it's native to Europe. Historically, it often grew as a weed in grain fields, which were just kind of collectively called cornfields, but it could have referred to anything that was wheat, barley, rye, or oats. So it was just kind of a generic, there's a grain field out there. So corn apparently used to just be a term for grain is what I'm gathering for this, but, you know, do your own research, take what I have put here as just a starting point, always cross-check, confirm, all that kind of stuff. My word is not law. Now, I do note that it was historically grown that way because due to agricultural intensification, the cornflower is actually now endangered in its native habitat, largely due to an overuse of pesticides. For instance, it is down from 264 known sites where it would grow in the UK to only 3, and that has happened over the last 50 years. So that tells you about some of that man-made impact on our environment. Now, whether the cornflower should have been allowed to grow where it did, that's kind of up for debate, but we are currently endangering it. Fortunately, we have actually naturalized the cornflower in North America and in parts of Australia, largely through its introduction as an ornamental plant, but also it has been a little bit of a seed contaminant among other crop seeds, which kind of explains why cornflowers might grow in grain fields. So, again, it's this annual plant, and it actually apparently also produces fruits. I don't know if you can eat them or not, but I think the fruits actually have like little spines on them, so you might not want to. Sorry, my nose itches. I think I just sniffed the tea a little too intensely there. But the flowers, as you would expect from the name, when you're thinking about cornflower, sometimes called blue cornflower, it's actually an intense blue, and these flowers can grow up to about 3 centimeters in diameter. So they're not huge, but they're a decent size. You can definitely see them. The pigment in the cornflower comes from a chemical called protocyanin. Remember, anthocyanins cause that more reddish color, so protocyanin, or reddish purple color. So then protocyanin in cornflower causes blue. And I mentioned specifically that in cornflower it causes blue because this exact same chemical, protocyanin, is what makes roses red. Yeah, that's potentially a little, right? So what's interesting then is that the pigment was extracted in 1913, or isolated in 1913 for the blue cornflower, and then in 1915 for the rose. And the difference in color was actually originally put forward as being due to a pH difference across the petals, but it's not. It's actually due to the fact that blue cornflower has a supramolecular pigment complex of anthocyanin, flavone, 1 ferric ion, 1 magnesium ion, and 2 calcium ions, which together operate as a copigmentation force. So because of the presence of this other molecule, this other pigment molecule, the supramolecular pigment, when that meets with the protocyanin, then it creates blue instead of red. So roses are obviously lacking that same pigment. Although I imagine that by isolating that pigment and finding a way to breed that into your roses is how you can actually get other colors of roses naturally. I'm not a botanist or anything like that, so I don't know a lot about how to basically create your own rose variety and things like that. I do know that they are patented though. I think it's patented, not copyrighted, but they are protected by, basically intellectual property kinds of things, and you have to have specific permission to actually breed them and grow them and all that kind of stuff. So there you go. Anyway, cornflower flowers can be eaten raw. You can also eat them dried, or you can eat them cooked. Dried petals are typically used in teas and spices, hence why we have some here today. And you typically will use the cornflower to add color to your drinks or to food, but it also then serves as a nice pretty garnish on salads, drinks, desserts, that kind of stuff. In folklore, cornflowers were worn by young men who were in love, hence why it got its name, bachelor button. And the legend said that if the flower's color faded quickly, then the young man's affection was not returned. So, sign of unrequited love there. Little sad. It has also actually been the national flower of Estonia since 1918, and it symbolizes daily bread for some reason, probably because of its association with grain. At one point in time, it was actually a national symbol of Germany as well, and that's due to a story that when Queen Louise of Prussia fled Berlin while pursued by Napoleon's forces, she hid her children in a field of cornflowers, and she kept them quiet by weaving wreaths out of the flowers for them. So, because it actually also had the same color as that Prussian military uniform, the flower became identified with Prussia as a whole, and then following the German unification in 1871, the flower just became adopted as a symbol for the entire country for a little while. There are other uses and associations symbolically with the cornflower, but I don't want to go too much into that. I am going to go ahead and measure my water and start steeping my Earl Grey here, because I'm about to start talking about bergamot. So bergamot is a type of citrus, which you may or may not have known. Again, with the oil, it's going to essentially give its flavor and scenting to those tea leaves, which is traditional in our Earl Greys. It is actually classified as a type of orange in that citrus family. However, in color, it's actually yellow or sometimes green, depending on ripeness. Green to the point where it is like lime colored. So from the outside, you would think that you were getting a lime there, except it is nowhere near as smooth. It's kind of lumpy. So it is actually about the size of a typical orange. So that's another way that you know that you're not getting a lime. And when you slice it, it really does look like just kind of a green orange, which is, it's very pretty. When I've seen pictures, I don't know that I've actually seen a bergamot in person. But anyway, it is genetically thought to be a probable hybrid of lemon and bitter orange. The extracts then are used in a variety of things like food, perfume, and cosmetics. However, using bergamot extract on your skin can increase photosensitivity. So if you're checking your ingredients and you notice that you've got bergamot oil in something you are applying to your skin, definitely take extra care with your sun care, because it can increase how much your skin gets damaged by the sun when you're outside. So that's a major downside there. Now, the name bergamot comes from the Italian bergamotto, which in turn comes from the Turkish for the Lord's pear. Not like Lord necessarily God Lord, but it's definitely, associated with royalty. So, interestingly enough, it's a small tree that blossoms during the winter, and that's what I think is interesting. And then if you're going to drink it as a juice, it is less sour than lemon, but it is more bitter than grapefruit. So I'm having a hard time actually picturing what that's going to taste like, but I've also never had bergamot juice on its own. I've only ever had bergamot when it's been in my Earl Grey tea. So that's, I think, probably one reason why you have some of that iconic taste to the Earl Grey on that, but I don't know. Bergamot is actually frequently confused with citron, which is a yellow fruit in that same family, and it's also sometimes confused with sweet lemon or sweet lime. They're the same thing, it's just a matter of what color it is. So again, bergamots can be yellow or green, so it makes sense that you would consider that you've got something else when you actually have bergamot. It is primarily produced around the Ionian Sea coastal areas in Italy, to the extent that it is actually also its own symbol, and it's a symbol for the entire city of Reggio di Calabria. Terrible at pronouncing things there. But that said, it is actually also produced in other places, such as Argentina, Brazil, Algeria, Côte d'Ivoire. Trying to, do my part to help with the government request in October 1985 to use the French name for that country, and not just anglicize it and ignore their wishes. So Côte d'Ivoire, it's in Africa. You can also find the plant bergamot in Morocco, Tunisia, Turkey, and Southeast Asia, which is actually where the fruit originates. Different countries do grow it for different regions. I know that, like Turkey, for instance, they largely grow it so they can have marmalade. And there's, I think it's Mauritius that grows it so that way they can actually produce the juice largely as something that the locals consume. But that said, if you are trying to grow it for the oil, it is quite the endeavor because it takes 100 fruits to yield 3 ounces of oil. I think I'd give up. I do not think that sounds like an economically sound platform at all. Now, the oil is obviously popular enough that people continue to produce it, and Italy has tight regulations for the production of that essential oil that comes from bergamot due to the adulteration of the oil with cheaper products, which includes rosewood oil and bergamot mint oil, and that can actually cause some problems for people who are actually trying to just get the bergamot oil. There were rival products that became popular from Brazil and Mexico, primarily using sweet lime. And they came about largely and were really sought after during World War II when Italy could not actually export the oil to certain countries, like the Allied powers. So they lost a huge amount of their market, and so other countries came in and produced something similar, but not exactly the same. Now, obviously, they probably can produce their own bergamot oil now that it's really more propagated down there and they have better access to it. But again, be aware of what you are buying and using, all of those kinds of things. In addition to tea, bergamot is used in confectionery, including Turkish Delight. So I don't know. I found that amusing, probably because it's kind of Christmassy. So you always kind of start to think about Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the White Witch. You've got the visit from Santa to them in that book, and Edmund betrays his entire family for Turkish Delight, which I have heard is absolutely horrible. I wonder actually if it's partly because of the bergamot, if it makes it just super super sour and bitter to actually consume. So we'll see. Anyway, you can also find bergamot in marmalade, as I mentioned, and again, that's going to be in Turkey and also in Italy. Italy seems to be a big fan of marmalade because they also like to put their blood oranges into marmalade. Now, in Sweden and Norway, bergamot is a common flavoring to add in snus. So it sounds like snuff, and that's because it's basically like snuff, but it's that smokeless tobacco product, and it's a variant of the dry snuff that you would place inside the lip and along your gum line, and you just kind of leave it there until basically you get the tingles, I guess. I don't know. I don't use tobacco products at all. I think tobacco in general is a disgusting concept, but that's a personal choice there. Anyway, in France, they use the bergamot oil to make square, flat candies, and specifically in the Argennes, Argennes, that region, and largely in the city of Nancy. I'm not sure if they pronounce it Nancy or not, but it's spelled like Nancy, and I'm English or American, so there you go. So they have this flat candy that is called Bergamote de Nancy, and yeah, so it's a square flat candy that is probably sour, bitter, and tastes vaguely like orange. There you go. Bergamot is actually also one of the most common ingredients for perfumery because it actually combines really well with other scents and helps bring this really great bouquet of aromas together. And just of note, so when talking about toxicity and those kinds of things, of note, do take care that you are not consuming tons of bergamot. Bergamot actually contains a chemical called bergaptan. And bergaptan is known to actually be a potassium channel blocker. And there was a man once who consumed 4 liters of Earl Grey tea a day and ended up suffering muscle spasms because of it. Muscle spasms, muscle cramps. So potassium ultimately has a major role in actually how your muscles function. It's a critical part of how we understand movement and just full function. So, don't go hitting the tea super hard. do not drink 4 liters of Earl Grey tea or bergamot anything a day. It will cause some negative effects. But that said, it takes 4 liters of Earl Grey tea a day, and I'm not entirely sure for how long, but let's just assume that 4 liters of Earl Grey tea in a day is not going to be good for you. So the good news is it takes that much, but the bad news is, you know, you can apparently have too much of a good thing. So we're going to go ahead and check out what's going on with our Earl Grey. This is a much lighter colored steep than most Earl Greys that I end up with. Yeah, it's a significantly lighter color. It's a very nice clear liquor though. I can see to the bottom of my cup. I'm getting some other notes when I just smelled my tea bag there. Not as much not as, like, again, predominantly Earl Grey. Let me go ahead and bring that up here. So yeah, you can see to the bottom. And again, it's a very light ambery color. Much lighter than I would prefer my Earl Grey. I think I'm starting to get more of the bergamot notes in here, potentially some of that the floral from the cornflower, because I'm now getting a much sweeter aroma than just like orange and tea than I was earlier. So I do think I would recognize that this tastes like Earl Grey and that I was drinking an Earl Grey, but it is definitely a weaker Earl Grey. Something about this particular blend, it's also possible that I just really didn't let it steep long enough in that muslin tea bag. I do know that that muslin tea bag needs a little bit longer of a steep, so it's possible I didn't give it as long on here. The balance of flavors is nice. It seems, I think, lighter than a traditional Earl Grey does. Very light-bodied, which is not actually really something I would necessarily associate with winter, but it is pretty light-bodied. It tastes nice. It really does. And on the as I'm kind of processing and finishing that out, I am getting more of, I think, my traditional Earl Grey flavor on that. So pretty happy. You know, I have a little bit left of it. I might play with the steep on that just to see what happens, see how well it holds up to some cream. But because of how light this is, I'm not sure I would want to risk it unless I really got a strong steep out of it. So that's where that stands. As far as where I would put it ranking-wise, I actually think I'd probably, for the fact that Earl Grey tends to be my absolute favorite, I think I'm gonna actually end up putting it right after the Just Peachy. Just Peachy is currently hitting at number 8, so this means that this particular winter Earl Grey is my new number 9. So that's where I'm at, and hopefully you'll be able to join me tomorrow for the first of the last 4 days of 24 days of tea, or as I've been calling it, the Advent Tea Year. Thank you so much, and have a great night.